The Manhwa begins in the middle of the desert, where our main character thinks that she is going to die, as a man points a sword at her while asking her to say her last words. The Cromwall Empire is called the ruler of the North, and that is where she lived a life of luxury. She lived in a huge manor, wearing beautiful dresses and dazzling jewelry, but those things were not the things that excited her. What she wanted the most was to travel the world. Every time she came across a new place, she felt she come ablaze, and that is how her travels began. She went everywhere from the North's prehistoric sites to the Fens settlement in Siberia, and before she knew it, she had visited all the nations in the northern continent. After that, she naturally made her way towards the southern continent. She started to cross the desert to reach Croatia, a nation in the south, but then she got lost. She has been there for a whole week, and can't tell which way is which because she was surrounded with nothing but sand. On top of that, she was almost out of water. It was at that moment she spotted some men and she ran to them to ask for help. When she got to them, she asked them if they knew Croatia, as all she wanted to do was ask them for directions. Back to the present, as the man points his sword at her, she wonders if he has an enemy in Croatia, and wonders why he is pointing his sword at her neck. He asks her if she has any last words and says that if she doesn't, then goodbye. He raises his sword to strike, and she yells that she hasn't said anything yet and that he should please put his sword away. She also tells him that he can't end her life, and he asks her why. She removes her cape as she says that it is because she is the most beautiful woman on the continent, as she thinks that she will charm him with her looks. She tells him that in her opinion, every country has a duty to protect beautiful women, and asks him if he doesn't agree. He remains quiet for a while, then he laughs and tells her that she is a funny woman, and then he asks her if that is her last word, which surprises her. He raises his sword, and as he brings it down, she thinks that she has to dodge the sword, which she does. She tells him that he can't just swing his sword without warning and that it is against the rules. He asks her what rules are there when it comes to ending people's lives, especially since at the end of the day, one will die and the other will survive. She looks into his eyes and wonders how a person's eyes can be so intense, and they remind her of the midsummer sun. He kneels in front of her, and she recoils, wondering why he is coming closer, and if he is going to try to end her life again. He holds her face and just stares at her, which makes her begin to wonder if her looks are working on him, and then he asks her how exactly is she beautiful, which makes her angry. He tells her that he was going to end her life right away, but he has changed his mind. He brushes her hair away from her face and tells her that she should be grateful he is sparing her life. The next thing Asina realizes is waking up in a dungeon. She wonders where she is, and why it is so hurt, and she is also very thirsty. She asks if anyone is there, and a guard shows up with a bucket of water and throws it on her face. He tells her that she will soon be thankful for the water and they will see how long she can endure the blazing sun. She curses and says that she at least feels better than before. Looking outside through the window, where she is, and what happened to her. She is in a prison built in the center of the city, where the sun shines the hottest. Judging by how the prisoners are being treated, and the way the people outside are dressed, she realizes that she is in the king of the desert, Pesian. Her homeland, Cromwall, is located in the northern continent while Pesian is located in the southern continent. It is a massive nation in the desert that makes up most of the south. Also, Pesian has had hostile relations with Cromwall for a long time, which is why she wanted to avoid Pesian while traveling the southern continent. She thinks that now isn't the time to dwell on her misfortunes. The prison was made to torture prisoners with deadly heat. And since she isn't used to such a climate, she knows that she will be in critical condition soon. She pulls out a pin and thinks that she has to get out of there first. After she manages to escape, she wears a disguise as she walks down the streets, but to her surprise, she sees the man who almost took her life earlier and wonders what he is doing there. Earlier, she picked the lock with the pin, which enabled her to be free. She inherited her beauty and silvery, moon-like hair from her mother. Her mother wanted her to grow up and become an elegant lady. Every time she ran away from home, Her mother flew into a rage and locked her up, but she wasn't the type to just sit back and take it. After she opened the lock, she thanked her mother for turning her into an escape artist. Repeatedly being locked up and escaping over the years made her strong, and helped her in her travels. She stayed fit and studied 100 different ways to escape while she was locked up. When she got outside, she sighed in relief and said to herself that prison is no place for a beautiful woman like her. She thought that she would have to dress like the locals if she didn't want to attract attention. Since the women in Pesian covered their faces, she wore a veil to cover hers, which she thought was a good thing since she was on the run. Then she walked along the street of Pesian, which she had only read about in books, in amazement. Pesian was said to be a beautiful and strong nation built with sand. That's why she has always wanted to visit, even if it was an enemy of Cromwall. Looking around, she beamed, thinking that Pesian is more amazing than the books described. It felt like she had entered a completely new world, and she thanked someone called Lamesha. She jumped, shouting hooray, which drew the attention of the people to her, and she told herself to be more careful so she won't get caught. She wondered if she should look for a place to sleep, but her stomach rumbled, so she decided to eat first. After she bought juicy-looking meat, which looked really delicious, and as she was about to eat it, she saw the man and dropped the meat in shock. Back in the present, the man looks in her direction, his red eyes glinting. She tells herself that she has to be calm and that he won't recognize her because her face is partially covered and they are in a crowded place. She starts walking in the opposite direction nervously, and when she glances behind her, she notices that he is following her. He stands in front of her, and she turns away, thinking that she is in trouble, and then looks at him again. He grabs her and says that he sees that she broke out of prison like a rat, and asks her to tell him how she escaped. Before she can say anything, a blue-haired man shouts his name, Sihad, and runs to him, asking him what happened. He shoves her to his guard and tells the one called Umar that he is leaving her to him, so he better not disappoint him. As they take her away, she wonders what he is going to do to her, and wishes that someone will save her. After that, Sihad and his blue-haired man arrive at the palace as the guard tells him that the woman, our main character, doesn't seem like an average woman and that Sihad should use that woman to his advantage. He says that she behaved aggressively, but her speech and appearance are unusual, as well as the air she gives off, and he believes that she may be the daughter of a noble in the northern continent. He tells Sihad that he might finally learn something about the relations between Cromwall and Croatia, and Sihad tells him that he should bring Bluer to his harem. Later, a woman greets our main character as she arrives in the palace, and tells her to follow her. She follows the woman through the palace. She looks around the place wondering where she is. The woman knocks on a door, and when they enter, she sees 3 other women, and she wonders who they are. Before she can ask, they grab her and start removing her clothes. She yells, telling them to touch her, and asking them what they are doing. Then they drag her into the bathroom and push her into the bath. As they bathe her, she thinks that they should have at least given her a warning before they stripped her and dumped her into the bath. After her bath, the women give her a dress to wear, and she asks them in shock if they want her to wear that. Meanwhile, in Sihad's chambers, he thinks about the main character, which makes him smile. His servant notices and points out that he must be pleased about something, and Sihad says that he is because he caught a rat. Back to our main character, she dresses up in the revealing outfit given to her by the women. She asks if the women in Pesian really wear that kind of clothing, and says that her entire stomach is showing. She had only put on the clothes because it looked like the women were prepared to knock her out and dress her in the outfit themselves. Then she suddenly remembers that she doesn't have her belongings. She wonders if the women stole her things while they were striping her earlier. Her map, money, clothes, and even the portraits of handsome men she had, are all gone, and more importantly, her ledgers that she can't go anywhere without are also gone. It is the only item that can prove her identity in an emergency during her travels. She wonders how she will find her belongings in such a vast place, and thinks that at least she has her most important possession on her, which is her earrings. They are special earrings that have been enchanted, and they make her silver hair and crimson eyes appear brown. Thanks to the earrings, She has been able to travel all she wants without her identity being exposed. The woman leads her to another place and she follows feeling uneasy, and she wonders where on earth they are going. The woman takes her to a room and tells her that it is where she will be staying in the harem. At first, she thinks that the room looks fancy, and then chills run down her spine as she registers that the woman said harem. She asks the woman if she said harem, and when the woman asks if the harem is the place where a man keeps several women and does whatever he wants with them, the woman says yes. She falls to the ground in shock and thinks that she would rather be thrown in prison than in a harem. She thinks that her current situation has to be Sihad's doing. She thinks that he is a lunatic and his good looks are wasted on him. The woman tells her to stand and that joining the harem is the greatest honor, so she should be rejoicing. Angry, she shouts, telling the woman that she should wake up and a man should only have one woman. She says she has been brought to a place where one man fools around with several women, and asks how that is supposed to be an honor. She tells the woman that she is being treated like a toy, it is unjust and she should open her eyes. The woman asks her why she thinks it is unjust, and says that she would be very happy if the Sihad considered her his toy. She thinks that there is no point in trying to argue with the woman because it is like she is talking to a wall, and the people are all brainwashed. She lies on the bed and says Lemsha should save her. She asks the woman why it is so quiet. And the woman replies that it is because she is the only Arya, meaning a woman in the harem, which surprises her. Back in Sihad's chambers, his servant announces that the High Chief of Dara is there to see him, and Sihad tells the servant to let the High Chief in. The High Chief enters, he greets Sihad, addressing him as Are Kuan, and introduces himself as the Jalil of Dara. Sihad asks him what brings him there. Jalil says that he heard he got back safely from the holy oasis of Ishmael, and came to pay his greetings. He rambles on for a while and then says that he heard that Sihad brought a fair-skinned woman into his harem. He also says that he is aware that even captives have been brought into the harem in the past. But he heard that Sihad knows nothing about the woman's descent, and asks Sihad how he could place the woman inside an important place like the harem. He continues by saying that the rumors of Sihad's diminishing wit might be true. Sihad crushes a piece of fruit in his hand and asks Jalil how he dares insult him while glaring at him. Jalil fears that Sihad might end his life, so he tells Sihad that she was merely speaking out of concern. Sihad tells him that he doesn't need his trifling concern, and orders him to get out. After Jalil leaves, Sihad licks the juice of the fruit on his hand and says that Jalil will see what happens when he challenges him again. That night, Asina, our main character, tosses and turns in bed as she thinks that she is really in a life-or-death situation. She slaps her face, telling herself to pull herself together, and thinks that she needs to find a way out because she can't become the wife of a sleazy man she doesn't know. She feels like breaking out of the palace will be a piece of cake because she has broken out of the Fen's infamously harsh prison in the north without breaking a sweat. But she has two issues. The first is that she has lost her belongings, and she will die in the desert without them. Especially her ledger. Her ledger LV 999 is a book that she made as a symbol of her parents' authority to access important routes during her travels. Without it, she can't freely travel within the northern continent, much less the southern continent, so she has to get it back. Her second issue is her earrings. The camouflage spell that was placed on them isn't invincible. She has to undo the camouflage spell and let the earrings rest for a week, otherwise they will break. Based on her calculations, the earrings should hold out for a week, which means she has to escape within a week. She gets up from her bed, saying she has to explore the place and learn the layout, and then she heads out. As she moves around the palace, she observes that the moon in Pesian glows white, whereas the moon in the north has a yellow glow. She wonders why the residence is as big as a palace. She notices that the buildings are systematically connected, which makes it difficult for anyone to infiltrate or escape, and where she is currently is so far inside. She realizes that escaping is going to be harder than she thought. She wonders why Sihad is living in a place like this, and who he is. Then she decides to find out what the building she sees at the other end is used for first. When Asina gets to the building, she jumps over a wall to avoid the guards moving around. As she walks around, she doesn't see anyone around, and she can't tell what purpose the building serves. But judging by the fancy decor, the building seems like it is being used by someone powerful. She decides to check out the garden next, and as she gets closer sees a figure in the stream, so she hides behind a bush and looks at the person in the stream while wondering what they could be doing in the garden late in the night. Chills run down her spine when she sees her captor, who she refers to as a crazy man, bathing. She turns away trembling, and starts crawling away so he won't hurt her. Before she can get far, Sihad stops her progress by pointing out that she is really acting like a rat. Then he tosses her into the water, and asks her what she is doing, if she has a hobby of peeping on other people, and if she is a spy. She angrily tells him that she wasn't peeping and that she is not a spy. Then she yells, asking him who he is, and how he can kidnap a woman off the street in broad daylight, yet no one said or did anything. He tells her that in this land he can do anything he wants, and she asks him if he is a god or the king of the land. He replies by asking her if she will be more quiet and obedient if he is the king. Then he holds her close as he says that his name is Sihad Zain Behdad, and he is the ruler of Pesian. She mumbles as she asks him if he is Ra-Kuan, the living god of Pesian, and he replies that he is glad that she at least knows what Ra-Kuan means. Then he carries her on his shoulders like a sack of potatoes and starts walking away while she yells that he should let her go. She asks him how he dares treat a beautiful woman roughly and says he will be punished while hitting him. Sihad takes her to his chambers, puts her on his bed, and asks her if she is a spy from Cromwall. Asina thinks that she has to hide the fact that she is from Cromwall no matter what. So she tells him that she is from the northern continent but not from Cromwall, and she is not a spy. He asks her why she was heading to Croatia, and she replies saying for sightseeing. She tells him that she is just an innocent traveler, and pleads with him to believe her while staring straight at him. He simply says all right, and then asks her if she is trying to seduce him, which surprises him. She wonders why he is looking at her strangely, and when she looks at her body, she sees that her outfit is transparent because it is wet, which embarrasses her, and she yells at him, asking him what he is looking at. He moves closer, making her lie flat on the bed, and puts his hand on either side of her as he says that she claims to be a beautiful woman. She recalls that they did when they first met and that he said she wasn't beautiful. She tells him to move, and he says that he can't tell if she is a beautiful woman, and grabs her face as he adds that she has beautiful eyes. Then he places his lips on hers. She struggles to pull away but can't, which makes him wonder why he is so strong. She manages to tell him to let go of her and shoves him a little. He leans away, grinning, and then tells her welcome to my harem, outsider. The following morning, Asina wakes up in her room and finds a girl there. She asks the girl who she is, and the girl introduces herself as Nur, the maid who will be serving her. Then Nur tells her that it is an honor to meet her and calls her Era. Asina wonders if Sihad assigned her acid to keep an eye on her because she was sneaking around the premises the previous day. Nur says to Asina that she heard that she had fair skin, but it looks like she really isn't Pesian. Asina confirms that she isn't from Pesian, and asks Nur why everyone keeps calling her Era, and what it means. Nur tells her that Era refers to the Kuan's women, and she has become a woman of noble status, who can serve the Sihad. And then she congratulates Asina, who thinks that Nur shouldn't tell her who to serve. Then she asks Nur if it means that she will accompany her everywhere she goes, and thinks that she can't devise a plan to escape with Nur watching her around the clock. Nur pours her tea as she says that she is simply there to assist her, and if she finds her bothersome, she can tell her to leave. Then she gives a relieved Asina her tea. After that, she leaves the room, telling Asina to call her if she needs anything. After Nur leaves, Asina thinks that she can't believe that she is being addressed as the Ra-Kuan's woman. Unlike Cromwall, where the people believe in a formless goddess called Lamesha, Pesian is a nation ruled directly by its god, who manifests as the ruler. The god is said to have brought water to the dry, sandy desert, fostering the growth of trees, and he is known as the Kuan. In Pesian, the Kuan isn't just a regular king. Everything from the nation's politics and economy to its culture and society revolves around the Kuan. He is revered as a living god. Asina recalls their kiss from the previous night, which makes her blush, and thinks that she doesn't care if he is the Kuan, he can't just do whatever he wants. The kiss makes her angry since it was her first kiss. Then she yells, wishing that he would fall on his bum. Meanwhile, in Sihad's chambers, the blue-haired guard gives Sihad an update on Jahid and asks him what he would like them to do. Sihad tells his guard to let Jahid be, and says that it will be interesting to see how far Jahid tries to take his insolence. Another guard whispers to the blue-haired guard, reminding him to ask Sihad about the woman who joined the harem. Then the blue-haired guard tells Sihad that in his opinion, he believes that putting the woman in the harem was a hasty decision and that the change seems rather permanent for what should have been a brief moment of amusement. He starts to bring up an incident that happened in the harem and Sihad glares at him, which makes him flinch and ask for forgiveness for misspeaking. The brown-haired guard tells Sihad that the Grand Vizier won't be pleased about this, especially since he has always wanted his daughters to be part of the harem. He continues by telling Sihad that there are also 6 high chiefs to consider, as well as 48 chiefs, who will all be scrambling to send their daughters into the harem. Sihad says he wishes to find out more about the woman in his harem and other them to bring her. Asina, who is having breakfast, is informed by Nur that Sihad wishes to see her. She protests by saying that she is eating, and Nur tells her that she must go immediately. As Nur takes Asina to Sihad, Asina wonders why he wants to see her, and why she has to go to him whenever he calls like she is a dog. Nur takes her into a room, where Sihad sits on his throne waiting. Nur tells Suhad that she has brought Asina, who just stands quietly, and then she starts to retreat. Asina tries to stop, wishing she wouldn't leave as she is afraid of what Suhad might do this time. She avoids Sihad's gaze because she is too embarrassed to look him in the eye as she recalls the kiss. He asks her how long she is going to avoid his gaze, and how her first in the harem was. His question makes her angry and she refuses to give him any form of satisfaction, so she tells him that she isn't avoiding his gaze, and she had a splendid night thanks to him. Then she smiles and asks him about his night. He stands up from his throne as he tells her that if she enjoyed the harem, he would gladly allow her to live there forever. His statements make her angry, but she just laughs and politely declines his offer. Then he points out that she was like an untamed cat the previous night, but now she seems uncharacteristically docile, and he grabs her by the waist, pulling her closer to him as he asks her if she is secretly plotting something. He holds her hand and thinks that it feels so soft, which makes him think that what Nasir, the blue-haired man, said about her being a daughter of a noble makes sense. Sihad asks her why she is heading to Croatia, and when she says sightseeing, he threatens to seal her mouth permanently if she says that word again, scaring her. She looks into his eyes and thinks that whenever he looks at her, he makes her feel like she is completely naked. The way his gaze scans her from head to toe gives her a feeling that she has experienced before. But amid the confusion, one thing is clear: her intuition is telling her to get away from Sihad. Then she starts talking about delicious dates and houses in the desert being the reason she wanted to go to Croatia. But Sihad doesn't believe her. He asks her if she crossed the desert of death just for that, and says that no one in the world would do that. Asina just stares at him, wondering if that is what the desert is called. Just then, Kasir interrupts them by announcing that the royal secretary has arrived. Asina instantly recognizes him and gladly thinks that her savior is there, while Sihad glares at Kasir, which makes him sweat. Kasir tells Sihad that he came because he called, and asks him if he should leave. Sihad tells him to stay and then introduces Kasir to Asina as his secretary. He starts to tell Kasir her name, but still when he realizes that he doesn't know her name, and then asks her what it is. She thinks that it took him long enough to ask, and tells them that her name is Asina. Kasir smiles at her, saying that he didn't recognize her because of her attire, and says that she looks very beautiful, which must please the Archduke. Asina responds by saying that she is a beautiful woman, and Sihad Nasir takes her away, which annoys her. Nasir follows a grumbling Asina to the door, and then turns around and nods at Sihad. Earlier, Sihad had told Nasir that Asina might be scared of him because she wouldn't talk when he questioned her, but she also didn't seem like the type who can be intimidated into talking, so Nasir should coax the truth out of her instead, and find out her true identity. Later, Asina arrives at Nasir's office, face covered with a veil, because she was told to cover her face in the presence of another man. He starts writing as he asks her where she is from, since she said that she isn't from Cromwall, and she tells him that she came from Sigrin, a very small kingdom along Cromwall's southeastern border. He says that he didn't know such a kingdom existed, and she says that it is so small that not many people know about it. In truth, Asina just stopped by Sigrin on her way out of Cromwall. Then she asks Kasir why the desert, where she got captured, is called the Desert of Death. He tells her that she is talking about the Desert of Death Kaye Jarda, and says that it is called the Desert of Death because the desert doesn't collect water even when it rains. As a result, one can't find water anywhere, and due to the constant wind, the topography keeps changing, so it is easy girl one to lose their way there. With the harsh environment, one would die if they got lost in the desert for just a few days. There are quite a few travelers who have died in the desert, and many exiled clans have also died in Jarda, which is why it is referred to as the Desert of Death. Kasir also says that there are also rumors that the desert is haunted and cursed. Then he thinks that he can't tell whether Asina is telling him the truth or not, and decides to test her. He asks her if she knows that Croatia and Pesian are currently enemies, and she tells him in shock that she didn't know. She tells him that she was aware that Croatia was created by the people who were against the founding of Pesian, but she didn't know that the two nations were on bad terms. Kasir says that there was a conflict between Croatia and Pesian, and when he asks her if she wasn't aware, she blames her lack of knowledge of the matter on the North's records of the South always being updated a few years late. Then she says she now understands why she was treated like a criminal, and thinks that out of all people, she happened to ask the king of Pesian for the direction to the kingdom's enemy nation, and she escaped from prison, which made her seem even more suspicious. She tells herself that she should be grateful that they only threw her in prison. Kasir asks her if the guides didn't recommend that she travel around the desert instead of through it like all the northerners heading to Croatia. She says that they suggested that route, but she refused, which baffles Kasir. He thinks that based on what she has said so far, he can't tell whether she is lying or not, but he will be able to tell if she lies about her reason for traveling through the desert. She says that in the northern continent, the mountains change color every season, and the fields are green and beautiful, but what they don't have is an ocean made of sand. That is why she wanted to see the desert. Kasir, who was born in Pesian and grew up in the desert, has never once felt like the way Asina feels about the desert. He asks her what her thoughts are after seeing the desert, and she tells him that the desert was much more breathtaking than she had imagined. In fact, it was so beautiful that she didn't mind the thought of melting away under the burning sun. That is why she was surprised to hear that such a beautiful place is called the Desert of Death. Nasir concludes in his mind that Asina is telling the truth, and tells her that he thinks that she is the only person in the world who would call the Desert of Death beautiful. He looks into her eyes and thinks that no one would be able to deny she is beautiful after looking into her eyes. Kasir places her bag on the table and says that the contents of the bag have been examined, and the items that don't seem suspicious will be returned, but he will be keeping the suspicious ones. She thinks that that is fine since her ledger is the most important item, and it is covered by a protection spell. He tells her that that is the end of the investigation, and says that he believes that he will be seeing often from then on, and he looks forward to it. She smiles and says that it would be nice. Later, after Asina's departure, a guard called Karim arrives at Kasir's office, and Kasir tells him that he needs him to guard the harem for the time being, and a lady has been brought in. Karim asks him what he is talking about and points out that he is the Archduke's tamer. The desert warriors were very strong because they had no other choice if they wished to survive the barren land. Among these warriors, some lived solely to serve the Kuan regardless of their affiliation to any clan. These warriors are called tamers, and Karim is the most skilled tamer of them all. Kasir points out that Karim doesn't look happy about his new assignment, and says there were more than a few things about Asina he found suspicious. Her reason for traveling is unclear, and her belongings seem questionable in many ways, and it doesn't make sense at all that a woman would be traveling alone. Karim says he doesn't understand and asks Kasir why he can't just end Asina's life if she is suspicious. Kasir replies that he didn't get the impression that Asina was a spy, and says that guarding the harem is Sihad's orders. He adds that he is sure there is a reason Sihad put Asina in the harem and asks Karim if he intends to disobey Sihad. In Asina's room, Asina lies in bed thinking that Kasir seemed like a nice person, but she wonders if he really believes that she is a traveler considering how she has behaved so far, and she wouldn't be surprised if he thinks that she is a spy. Cromwall and Croatia are allies, but both nations are enemies with Pesian. She thinks that if her identity gets exposed after she admits that she was heading to Croatia, her family could suffer grave consequences, as well as Cromwall. She knows her parents wouldn't crumble so easily because of such conflict, but she doesn't want to cause trouble for her father, who has always been supportive of her travel, and her mother, who loves her despite being strict with her. Just then, Nur informs her that the tamer, who will be guarding her, has arrived, and she wonders if that is the man who works as Ra Kuan's bodyguard. Before she can say anything, Karim beiges inside despite Nur's protest and walks until he gets to Asina. He frowns as he just stares at her, and Asina assumes that he is wondering what a nobody like her is doing there. She is used to being treated like this because a lot of places she has been to aren't welcoming to outsiders. However, she knows how to behave in such situations. She politely tells him that it is nice to meet him, and apologizes for bothering covering her face, which catches him off guard. He was expecting her to look more rugged because he was told that she broke out of prison, and wonders how she did that with such a frail body, and how she got all the way to the southern continent. He thinks that he might have made a mistake in glaring at such a young woman. He tells her to forgive his rudeness and introduces himself to her. She does the same and tells him that she would like him to call her by her name instead of Era. He agrees to do that and tells her that he will be standing guard outside the harem at all times, so she should call him if he needs anything. After he leaves, she thinks in addition to Nur, there is now one more person keeping an eye on her, which will make her running away trickier. She decides to take a walk and look at the layout of the buildings nearby because she feels restless. She walks down a long corridor, not noticing Sihad leaning on a pillar, until he asks her where she is going, shocking her. She thinks that he is the last person she wants to see, and yet there he is glaring at her. She tells him to stop glaring at him and Saya, that she is well aware that she seems suspicious. He asks her if she is just figuring that out. Angry, she asks him why he is there, and he replies by asking her if he needs a reason to come to his harem. She asks him what is the real reason he is there, and he says that he wants to see her, which shocks her. She starts yelling at him and he laughs as he thinks that there isn't a moment of boredom when he is with her. Usually, he sees one of two emotions in the eyes of those who look at him. One is reverence and the other is fear, but Asina shows neither. He thinks that she seems to see him exactly as he is reflected in her eyes, which is surprising to him. He takes her hair, kisses it, and asks her if she is finding the harem comfortable, which makes her blush. This brings us to the end of part 1, and comment Asina for part 2. Please like and subscribe to Manhwa Nuna for more manhwa recaps. Thanks for watching. Bye.